find what you need for a seamless shopping run. Or huddle up with our Lowe's Red Vest associates to help make all your game time hosting decisions.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food, no matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings. Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
With MedGuard Alert, you're never alone. You can connect with medical professionals anywhere, anytime. And now MedGuard is introducing our exclusive new CareWatch. If you need help quickly, use it from anywhere to contact medical professionals. No cell phone required. The CareWatch is not only a life-saving medical alert device, it's a revolutionary health monitoring system that checks your blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, and much more. And here's the best part. If you have Medicaid, you may qualify to get your CareWatch for free. The CareWatch is only available through MedGuard Alert. Call us right now. We have monitoring programs starting as low as $1 a day. The call is free, activation is free, shipping is free, and no contract is required. Remember, with Medicaid, you may qualify to get your CareWatch for free. Call us to get your CareWatch right now.
800-681-8020. 800-681-8020. 800-681-8020. That's 800-681-8020.
It's time for the annual Volkswagen Sign and Drive event going on now at Terry Volkswagen. During this event, Volkswagen throws out the best deals of the year. For example, right now you can lease a new 2024 Volkswagen Tiguan Wolfsburg Edition for only $389 per month, or a new VW Taos for only $299 a month. That's zero down, folks. Just sign and drive with approved credit. But don't wait, because these deals don't come along often. Come see us today at Terry Volkswagen, where we say you'll love our cars.
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
Well, we're not exactly going to be able to play the full version of the anthem because, well, a performance like that only warrants this.
Those haters can't stand us. Left hand up. Who are we? The Commanders.
Because the Washington Commanders yesterday fell down early to Philadelphia. Never really stopped the running game. And to their ever-loving credit, Philadelphia forced a lot of turnovers. But the most telling point in that game yesterday was that Washington was grasping for what they could. And you get to the start of the second half, and they just forced a Philadelphia punt. It's 34-23. Washington starting to find a rhythm. They'd already established that they could convert on fourth down and third down. Jaden Daniels looked like he was getting comfortable. He's patient, marching down the field. The only interception of the 4 turnovers that Washington had, only one was an interception, and I really don't blame Daniels.
He was making a play. So I would argue, yeah, and I said this morning, I think that he could get part blame for the Eckler fumble because it was a bad ball to him that made Eckler go to the ground and then get back up, and that's what forced the fumble.
But regardless of who's to blame for it, that was the key play of the game that extinguished the chance. It was the most momentum-changing play of the game.
It ended the game.
As you heard on VTR and Sports Your Home, for the entire NFL playoffs, including starting at 2 p.m. in 13 days, Super Bowl 59. But this was the play that really flipped the game. Because if Washington goes down and scores, all of a sudden Philly is breathing deeply. What may be a 3-point game from an 11 to a 3-point deficit, touchdown, 2-point conversion. But instead, this happened.
Washington driving once again. 30 seconds to go in the third. Deep drop. Daniels. The throw was low. The ball pops free. Catch was made at midfield. The Commanders turn it over again. Third time today.
That's the call that you heard right here on VTR and Sports, thanks to Westwood One, your home for the NFL playoffs, because the third turnover was the most debilitating for Washington. As we mentioned, the momentum was starting to build for the Commanders. They had cut it to an 11-point game. They forced a Philadelphia punt deep in Philly territory, and it looked like Philly was going to be able to down the ball deep in Washington territory, but two special teams players for Philadelphia collided, and because the one that went into the end zone and had already touched down the end zone, Keely Ringo jumps up and makes contact with the ball, it all of a sudden becomes a touchback. It's kind of quirky, but that's how the NFL works. So instead of getting it at the 2, Washington gets it at the 20. And they started to build momentum until that turnover. And Dan Quinn was very clear afterwards that in his eyes, that by far was the one that changed the entire complexion of the game.
Yes. Yeah, we kind of talked at the half. This is going to be grimy. We're going to fight back into it. But that's the life that we've kind of lived this season. So we were comfortable in those tight spots. And so we thought, okay, it's about to turn. And so then, they got their, I think, a takeaway during that next one. Yeah, but I felt the shift happen.
Because the shift was happening. You could start to sense the direction that game was flowing. And again, I'm not a Bill Barnwell guy. The whole momentum is not real thing. Clearly, it's spoken like a guy that's never played sports. Because if you played sports, like seriously, like he may be an analytics darling and he may be really smart when it comes to that. But if you've ever played sports, you understand like momentum is not tangible and statistically quantifiable, but it's very real. And the momentum got sucked out of the Washington Commanders when that fumble took place. And then Philadelphia marches right back down the field and goes in and scores a touchdown. And instead of it being an 11-point game, it's an 18-point game. But in reality, it was a 15-point swing. Washington goes down, gets a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, even a field goal, but certainly a touchdown and a 2. All of a sudden, it's a one-possession game. A field goal makes it 34-26. So Philadelphia is breathing heavy, and Washington has all the momentum. Instead, they cough the ball up in midfield. Philly forces the fumble and march right down the field, and the game was over at that point. I mean, anything that happened afterwards, particularly like the Jaden Daniels turnover, the interception late to Quinion Mitchell, as great of a play as it was by Mitchell, you're forcing the issue at that point. But that's where it's painful if you're a Washington fan, because belief was never an issue, as Jaden Daniels mentioned.
We believe that we belong here. We kudos to Philly and what they did. Hell of a team, and good luck to them.
Philadelphia, they played better. They had a deeper roster, and it's similar to what we mentioned when Washington and Philadelphia played the first game in Philly on Thursday Night Football, that Washington had lost 2 in a row at that point to Pittsburgh, which is how to be tough and finish ball games. That was something that you could learn from. We mentioned it at the time. Fast Lane, Ed Lane, wherever you listen to podcasts, because
and guess what? We keep receipts.
As Coach Prime would remind us. But the Philadelphia one was more of a roster construction issue. And that's a bigger picture deal. I do believe Washington will work to rectify that this coming offseason. And I actually think one of the biggest things they have to do is upgrade the offensive line, and that may entail weakening a division rival, because I think Philadelphia's not going to be able to keep Mekhi Becton. They've got 2 other big free agents. Now that you go to the Super Bowl, everybody wants to get paid. Washington will be glad to overpay for him, and that will be part of their strategy.
Yeah, but the problem with that is if you pay Mekhi Becton's at your own risk, given his history with the Jets, and
given his only good year has been his 1 year at Jeff Stoutland University.
Yeah. Like that's the one team I'd be nervous of taking. Granted, he'll be a well-coached offensive lineman, and I think they were able to unlock his talent this year. I think, and I said this morning, that moment was the nail in the coffin, but the coffin lid got put down when you had that basically the touchdown to go up 2012 after the Terry McLaurin touchdown. Like it felt like, okay, Washington's back in this. Then they give up a touchdown, and then they fumble on the kickoff, and then Philadelphia scores a touchdown, and it's like it's 27-12. I know they got that field goal right before half, but that was like the probably like the in boxing you get like the one knockdown, and then that last fumble when it was 34-23 was the knockout punch.
See, I will disagree. I actually think it was not only was it the knockout punch, but it was the momentum flipper in the game.
Well, I'm saying
because Washington had this history, including against Philadelphia, of making fourth quarter comebacks, and they were starting to make one late in the third quarter, and they had made 5 throughout the year. And Daniels,
but they hadn't shown. The problem was they really hadn't shown stopping Philadelphia. They stopped them once.
But if you stop them once, you go down and you get at a tight ball game. All
Twice.
of a sudden, you might be able. Again, momentum. Sorry to Bill Barnwell, but momentum is real. You have the momentum on your side, and all of a sudden you're believing. And isn't that how Washington had largely built their season? Is the idea of momentum and belief. And once that got extinguished from another turnover, and it's not just the turnover, it's the fact that Philadelphia calls the turnover and did something with it that totally changed everything.
Fair, yeah. They have 4 turnovers led to 4 touchdowns. The one advantage Washington clearly had, and I'm talking about this season, they clearly had in this game, was at quarterback. And and maybe it's because they won and they put 55 points up, but Philadelphia had the better quarterback in this game. And it's not that Daniels played bad. I think Jalen Hurts just played better. And, Hurts, to his credit, stepped up again in the big game. Like his 2 biggest games that occurred now is an NFC Championship and a Super Bowl. That's pretty good. He's going to his 2nd Super Bowl in 4 years. That's also pretty good. The only guy. So it's not that Washington had such a small margin of error. And I talked about it this season. They had with their roster, they had such a small margin of error, and it hit perfectly against Detroit. And Philadelphia, which might have the best roster in the NFL all season, exploited it perfectly. You had the sequence right before half that kind of built enough cushion for Philadelphia that forced Washington to press when they were doing that drive. And then ultimately, Oren Burks makes a great play, punches the ball out, and then Philadelphia, which shows why there's been such a great team, and they've won, 13 games when Jalen Hurts starts to finish in a row now. They go on, they score 55 points. So you win 55-23. It ultimately is not a close game. Like,
it was not at the end, but I genuinely believe if Washington goes down and makes it 34-26, and especially if they get a touchdown or 2, and all of a sudden it's 34-31, there are a lot of nervous people in Philadelphia, given Washington had already come back against Philly. Jaden Daniels had a propensity to do that, and that team had the dirtiest 4-letter word, but what Jaden Daniels constantly gave them with those comebacks was the idea of hope, which is what Washington was building themselves off of. And instead, the Austin Eckler fumble happens at midfield, another play by Philadelphia, and Dan Quinn mentioned this, but Philly deserves credit. As much as I've heaped on Jaden Daniels this year, and I think he's the real deal, Washington will benefit next year because they can build around Daniels the next 3 years, really 4 to 5, before a big extension will kick in financially for him. The league will adjust, but Washington, I think, they've got a smart front office. They can get a good roster around him. And that's one of the things they can do. But Philadelphia, you mentioned the margin for error. It's not only that, but Washington could not afford to have turnovers. You have 2, and you kind of felt like you got away with it. But eventually you have 3 and 4, and it catches up with you. And Dan Quinn, to his ever-loving credit, mentioned this, that it wasn't just bad turnovers by Washington. It was, as you mentioned, Trey, the overall talent of Philadelphia's roster causing those turnovers.
Yes, and the only way to get into the plus, you got to create some too. And so we'll give Philadelphia credit. I didn't, they caused them. It wasn't fumbled snap or something that was reckless in that way. They caused them. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't point out to, that's a good job by Fangio and their crew of creating the ball. And like we said, we knew both teams were at +6 after 2 games. So it was something we talked about a lot, to winning the turnover margin in this game. And so like over 7 weeks, we've been, pretty complimentary in that spot. And this was our first time not doing that.
And there are a couple other things that jumped out as well about this game from a Washington standpoint. One is the turnovers, and you mentioned the lack of margin for the Washington Commanders that I think will get resolved this offseason. They've got plenty of cap space. They don't have to dedicate it to their most important and valuable player, Jaden Daniels, for another couple of years. So they can add a lot of quality pieces around him. T. Higgins to be one of them, probably.
We'll see what happens. I mentioned the losses of Zach Ertz, and Ertz came out today and said he wants to play again, so we'll see. But I'm assuming Bobby Wagner's retiring.
Yeah, and Tyler Biadasz, he was another short-term
Who got
player
right hooked from
He got did from Jalen Carter. Well, he put Jalen Carter in the face mask, and then Jalen Carter was just like, okay.
That was one thing about this game, Phil, and it's why I had more confidence because of Hurts. Like, Philadelphia responded every time Washington got close. It was that Terry McLaurin touchdown. Then it led to that stretch of it was the 4th and 5 deep ball to AJ. They score again. They score again before half. And then the last time they got it close, when it was 34-23, they forced the fumble. They score twice. They get the stop. It looked like also Philadelphia's offensive line as the game was going, or defensive line as it was going on, was taking over that game. Like, the pressure, and granted, when you're up multiple scores, you can tee off more, but the injuries in the offensive line were catching up for Washington. It just felt like, and I think you've said this, Philadelphia was clearly the better team coming in. They had the better roster. It honestly, and I said this morning on the morning warm-up, check that out wherever you get your podcast, should plug that Washington now knows, all right, this is the bar. Now, I think the NFC will be better next year. Improved Green Bay, a healthy 49ers.
The Rams can start.
The Rams have cap space and a picks for the first time in 20 years, as I said. The Lions, roster-wise, will be intact. We'll see how they do. We'll see if the coaching changes help.
They'll get healthier.
That too. They'll be healthier on defense. So I would not be shocked if record-wise, Washington and even Philadelphia takes a step back, just because Washington's playing a harder schedule. They won a lot of games, one-score games with a lot of luck. Doesn't mean it's kind of like Houston this year. Houston had a perfect season, like maximized their rookie season with CJ Stroud. This year, they had some injuries. They took a step back, but they still have a lot of hope with CJ Stroud. I feel kind of the same way about Washington next year. If we want to look, thank you. We want to look ahead. But now, Howie Roseman is well on his way to be a Hall of Fame GM. Adam Peters hopes to strive to that. As Adam Peters said in that great clip when they were talking about the Cooper DeJean trade, you're a pain in the butt. I think he said the A word. Well, I'm not going to say it here. I'll be nice. This is now the bar for Washington is Philadelphia, because clearly the Giants going to be a mess. Dallas, maybe even worse. It's going to be these two teams next year for the division. History says Washington will win it because basically, like, since 2004, a team hasn't gone back-to-back. But also history says if you win a lot of one-score games, they tend to come back to you the next season. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out.
There will, and you're not wrong with the idea of the league adjusting to Jaden Daniels. Those are all things that we'll get into in the offseason. We'll also get into the fact that, it's a fine line playing as emotion-based as Washington did with the amount of fire they did. But the fact that sometimes when you do that, a lot of the push the limits type plays can be a challenge. And Washington, they got away with that at junctures, but they did not get away with that against Philadelphia. Some of their penalties were more poorly timed. The Marshawn Lattimore pass interference penalty, which kept a touchdown scoring drive.
Mikey Sammer still
Mike
a hit.
Sammer is still the hit out of bounds. You're playing that type of style. Frankie Louvu, that's a whole nother thing. And again,
that was just hilarious.
It really was.
And I don't blame Louvu. Like, you're just trying to time the snap.
I don't blame him, and I don't blame Washington at all. But
I just wanted to see him get awarded the points. I thought that would have been hilarious.
Oh, it would. But that will be a topic for later.
Can I ask you one question about this game?
Yes.
Because we talked about it a little bit this morning. That the decision to kick. So he went to Washington went fourth down twice. And it probably looks bad because, Sean Barkley, as that Washington fan said. Have you seen that clip?
No, I've not seen that, but I did see the one of the misspelling of Eagles by the
Philadelphia. Okay, so I will show you during the break the Washington fan. I think this is after the Thursday night game. They were interviewing. He's like, I can't believe they let the Eagles say Sean Barkley. So I said that this morning. But Saquon scoring that 60-yard touchdown, it probably looks worse. Do you think they should have kicked the field goal there? Because I'm 50-50 on it. I think you should have been aggressive. But
glad you asked, Trey, because Dan Quinn spoke about this after the game.
For sure. Like we've been living and owning the ball and working. So I thought we were aggressive on our, fourth down ops to go for it. And then once it got, out of whack at the end, I don't know what the numbers would say at the end, but I thought we had to be bold. We had to be aggressive to take our shots against their offense, so they weren't into that space as well. I was pleased after the first long touchdown run in terms of how the guys performed in the run game. But for sure, playing from behind and catch up is always tougher.
So Dan Quinn mentioned, it kind of dodged around the issue of the fourth down decision-making. But after Saquon Barkley's first touchdown run makes it 7-0 Philadelphia, which, by the way, even though Jake Elliott missed a 53-yard field goal, why they attempted that given his poor record this year. Yes, he was undefeated or was perfect kicking in the postseason from field goals. He also is 1 for 6 now, I believe, from 50+ this year.
Hasn't hit a 50 this year.
So is not hit a 50 this year, which is kind of ironic. And it's never been distanced. But anyway, it's 7-0 Philadelphia. Washington's converted multiple fourth downs, including in that fourth and 1, 2, 3 range. And yet they kick a field goal early against Philadelphia. That's the one where it's probably the biggest head scratcher of all of them.
It was a 4th and 5 they converted, and a 4th and 2 they converted.
Correct. Okay.
It was 4th and 3 from the Philadelphia 22. They kicked the field goal.
And that one, that was a head scratcher because you
looks worse with the 60-yard touchdown.
Well, you do, but you also have to have the mindset, I think, at certain points of a field goal is not going to get it done. So we have to keep being aggressive and going for points. Generally speaking, I'm largely okay with kicking field goals early in the game. But situationally with how Washington was playing and knowing that their defense does have its own issues against Philadelphia and that the offensive line is not great, you need touchdowns early in the game as well. It's not always the case, but I think this is a bit of an exception to the rule. Meanwhile, when we return to the fast lane, before covering the Commonwealth, Richie McKay, big victory for Liberty. And what he thinks of it and what the team did. That when we return, this is the Fast Lane, VTR and Sports app, 93.3 FM.
Selection, value, finance options, and exceptional service. Why start anywhere else? It's all in one location at the Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. And with straightforward pricing and inventory arriving daily, there's no reason to start anywhere else than the Motor Mile. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume. The Used Car Superstore is your one stop for most makes and models. Cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. Shop over 900 used vehicles in stock now, more than any other dealer in the area. Sheeler owns the finance company, so getting approved for credit is easy on the Motor Mile. With financing options for every budget, you're a valued customer and not just a number on the Motor Mile. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier family-owned car dealer serving Southwest Virginia and surrounding areas for 50 years. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com. And we're excited to welcome Honda and Hyundai to the Motor Mile family. Why start anywhere else?
Allstate agent Donovan Howell is now serving Lynchburg. He lives and works here just like you. And with all kinds of local insurance advice, Donovan is someone you can count on to help you protect all that's good in your life. Donovan makes it easy to save on the quality protection you need, and I'll even help you do the switching and the paperwork for you.
Call or come by the Donovan Howell Allstate office in Windhurst today.
Are you already done with winter? At Aquatrek Adventures, we can help you escape. Scuba classes are forming right now. We can have you ready for warm, picture-perfect beaches, clear tropical water, and blue skies in sunny Florida, Cozumel, the Cayman Islands, or even Fiji once you complete your certification. Take that first step. Call Aquatrek Adventures on Mill Lane in Salem and visit our website at aquatrekadventures.com.
Hey, this is Virginia Tech analyst and former Hokies tight end Mike Burnham. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
We'll get more into the Virginia Tech Hokies' new defensive coordinator, inside linebacker coach Sam Cephas. I think that's right.
I bet you David Cunningham will know.
He'll know when we ask him around 5:40 today and covering the Commonwealth. To me, it's kind of, this is what it was for all, waiting over a month, and this is who you wind up with. Seems kind of underwhelming, although, maybe the news coming out about how Jim Knowles went to Ohio State and Anthony Poindexter apparently
went
signed
to Penn
off
State
went to Penn State from Ohio State, and Anthony Poindexter not only staying, but apparently signing off on it and agreeing to it. I don't know if it's because he got more, as Kenny Powers would say,
dollar bills, y'all.
Because he lost
lots of power
by that move. You kind of wonder if that's the case. But once that happened, he was going to give the old rejected Anthony Poindexter was to Virginia Tech's offer. So it wasn't going to happen. But we'll get to that later. Weekend action. Basketball. Liberty Flames. Richie McKay, they get a convincing victory down at FIU. We'll get into the weeds on that tomorrow about how that transpired. But for McKay, I think the big thing for him is he can finally get this wins record talk out of the way.
Yeah, and you really don't think about it when you're in the midst of the journey. You're just I'm trying to give my very best. I want to represent Liberty the right way, and that conviction is something that I think our staff and our players share. We feel like it's a privilege and an honor to be a part of a university like ours, and sure, winning is part of it, and I get that, but I just, honestly, and I've said this before, what I'm most proud of is the kind of young people that have come through our doors. When they get here, they're terrific. And then when they leave, they're even more emotionally mature and have some greater spiritual depth in a lot of instances. And to me, that's being faithful, being a faithful shepherd, if you will, that we're gonna try and produce men that can continue to make his name great.
Richie McKay, after the win against FIU, big shout out to seaofred.com, their founder, John Manson, covering the Commonwealth today, 5:45 p.m. For Liberty, I think Richie McKay, it's good for him because he gets that out of the way, but he didn't want it to be about him. But, it speaks to the fact that in this era where, again, sometimes I get it, but the athletes being more self-centered, me over we, than ever before, it's kind of refreshing to see this when you talk about Richie McKay and the wins record for Liberty. And the fact that he stuck around, he's done it after being the head coach, leaving to go be an assistant for Tony Bennett once again at UVA, and then coming back to Liberty a second time. And look, for all the issues around the Flames, he's done a good job of finding a way to generate the right level of team chemistry, which they've always prioritized that. To a fault, I think you could say last year because they lost some talent. But Colin Porter mentioned after the win against FIU that, yeah, they were aware of what McKay's wins record was. And while McKay didn't want to make a big deal out of it, clearly the players seemed to love him enough.
We were aware of it throughout the week. May have heard it a couple times. No, but once the game started, we really didn't think anything of it. Then whenever we got the win, we were walking to the locker room, and Coach Zach came up to me. He said, "Be sure everyone knows that he just got the record."
That's awesome.
So we got our water bottles together, a couple Gatorade bottles, So we had a little fun with it, but he deserves it. I mean, he's a special guy.
Pretty cool. I mean, just pretty cool to see how the Flames rallied around Richie McKay and gave him the victory. One of the positives from this past weekend, and a weekend where it didn't seem like there were a ton of them when it comes to local basketball, which we have to tackle right now in the Fast Five at 5-ish.
It's time for Fast Five at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
Virginia Tech. Clemson pulls away from the Virginia Tech men last night, or Saturday night, on VTR and Sports, your home for Virginia Tech men's basketball. Is this not the embodiment of what you get? This is who Virginia Tech men's basketball happens to be right now. They fought hard for the majority of that game. I felt like, by the way, when we said Virginia Tech would cover it, 8.5 to 9, but not win, I felt like we had the right handicap, just the wrong result. Because Virginia Tech kept it to be a fairly close game until the last 5 minutes. And right now, that's kind of who Virginia Tech seems like they are. They're a 35-minute team, not a 38-minute team or a 40-minute team, meaning they'll keep it close for a while, but at some point the dam breaks and away things go. And look, I never doubted Clemson would win. Brad Brownell is not flashy. He hasn't had a lot of NCAA tournament success, but he consistently gets Clemson there because they are well-coached, fundamentally sound, and he's managed to do it even in spite of the era of NIL and the transfer portal that as much chaos happens to be in the ACC, somehow Clemson's in a solid spot. And you kind of had the feeling like Brad Brownell knew what Virginia Tech was going to do. They knew what each other were going to do, and the advantage will go to the team that could ultimately make micro adjustments over the game. And Virginia Tech can, coaching-wise, but player-wise, I just don't think they're quite ready.
Number 4.
Meanwhile, Virginia Tech women. I think this is the first game where you can say, outside of Notre Dame's the obvious example, but this is maybe the second game in ACC play, where you look at it and go, okay, but the first game in ACC play, but the second one that would be on their schedule, the other one being Notre Dame, which will come up. This is the first game where you sit there and go, this is the first taste of a Kenny Brooks drop-off in terms of cumulative talent. Virginia Tech is in a better spot than you would think with the first year of Megan Duffy and a largely schematic-based approach in the changes. Smaller, quicker, more guard-oriented. But they lost at NC State. They were down 29-12 after the first quarter in a game that never really felt competitive. And that's part of the reason where, look, I don't think it big picture stunts what Megan Duffy is doing, but I think you get a ceiling cap for Virginia Tech in terms of understanding what is and what is not feasible.
Number 3.
Meanwhile, to the Virginia Cavaliers, Virginia women's basketball, they came back against Louisville, but it fell short once again. They were down big entering the fourth quarter, came back, and once again, a 2-possession game for Virginia at the end. This is just kind of who they are with Coach Mox. And I don't pretend to know enough about basketball schematics, generally speaking, of what tweaks and adjustments you make to go from being a team that, in some cases they fall down big, but they show the heart to fight back. In other cases, they're in games late, but they just can't get over the hump. But it kind of seems like that's who they are right now through about the halfway point of the ACC women's basketball season.
Number 2.
Meanwhile, Virginia men, they got beat by 15 against Notre Dame at home in a game that was not even that close. At one point, it was 63-38. I mean, it was just a bloodbath in Charlottesville. It's one of the more depressing performances. And I thought Notre Dame would come in here and have a good chance to win, but I didn't expect it to be that lopsided. 74-59 in a game that really wasn't that close at all. And here's the thing for Virginia, where you have to sit there and feel a level of discouragement if you're Virginia. 6 of their losses, Virginia's 6 of 11 losses this year, have been by 15 points or more. And this is not a vintage Notre Dame team, even though they have the talent in the backcourt.
Number 1.
Shane Metlin has touched on this, and we'll get to ask him to kick off covering the Commonwealth next. And that is, there was once a bill in committee in the Virginia legislature that would have required Virginia and Virginia Tech to play other public FBS programs in the Commonwealth at least once every 8 years. The bill died this morning. I love the concept of that, to get more Virginia-based games. Heck, I'd like to see more of it in general. You know me, I've said this for a while, that instead of playing Campbell as a bye game for Liberty, might as well just play Norfolk State or North Carolina A&T, and at least you can bring up the band, and that'd be kind of cool. But, hey, that's not happening. There are bigger issues for the legislature to actually have to be working on, but, I'm a fan of intra-regional rivalry.
I think Norfolk State is a big risk, like very small reward with a big risk of if a Michael Vick head coach team beat a Brent Pry head coach team, it could cause unnecessary blowback, which granted, I don't think it would happen, but like in the 1 in a million chance it does. I'm just saying.
I can kind of get that, but I think the talent gap will be too wide in that situation. When we return, more on that news that Shane Metlin has been discussing, plus JMU hoops to kick off covering the Commonwealth next here in the Fast Lane.
We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Colt, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that, and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
A short drive will save you money.
Car buying is simple at Feller Chevrolet. You can buy online or at the store. It's quick, easy, and a clean, safe environment. We have non-commissioned salespeople and a 3-day money-back guarantee so you can buy with confidence. Feller's is also here after the sale. We can do warranty work on all GM cars, not just Chevrolets, and our techs can service all makes and models. No matter what your automotive needs, I promise we can deliver. So come see us. You'll be glad you did.
Feller Chevrolet in Alta Vista.
At Three Roads Brewing, we're a fabric of historic downtown Lynchburg. We brew community. Each month, Three Roads Brewing partners with a local nonprofit. Enjoy weekly events like trivia, bingo, and live music while sipping from one of our 20 taps. All to join Three Roads Brewing in supporting Lynchburg. Experience the charm of the Dan River District at Ballad Brewing. Join us for weekly events from our 5,000 square foot tap room. Fun like trivia, bingo, and live music plus 20 taps. And visit Ballad Brewing on Facebook for updated info like special events.
Hi, this is Zach Mackey, the voice of Virginia Tech men's basketball. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
So after having some uninspiring performances in Sunbelt play, credit to the JMU Dukes. Over the weekend, they actually came out and looked pretty solid. They jumped out to a 22-point lead over Georgia State. They were solid for much of the game. And the type of performance where you sit there and go, okay, maybe they found something. Maybe they're hitting on what they need to do. And you can kind of get a feel for them. We didn't touch on the Dukes, by the way, in the Fast Five at 5-ish. We touched on the other news from Shane Metlin of DNRonline.com and Shane_DNR Sports. But that's the one thing about JMU right now. They beat Old Dominion. They went on the road and win at Georgia State. Panthers get threes late. They hit 7 of them late in the game to kind of make it close down the stretch, but it really wasn't that close. And that's one of those, again, for JMU where, you're getting contributions from Bryce Lindsey. Maybe you're also getting to the point where JMU, the message that Preston Spradlin had been delivering, which is of needing to cut the excuses of having a new roster gelling together, of playing well, of understanding roles and responsibilities, where maybe you're at the point where you can go, okay, we've got now an idea of what to expect. And so that's the positive if you're looking at it from the JMU perspective is, look, they're 7th in the Sun Belt. It's a 1, maybe a 2-bid league. So again, what you do in the regular season is a build up to the conference tournament. But so far, it's the most positive thing you can find, which is playing your best basketball over the course of the season and looking like you're making improvements. So those are our thoughts on the JMU Dukes now from the expert to kick off covering the Commonwealth.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth. A look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the JMU Duke.
Shane Metlin, DNRonline.com, Shane_DNR Sports. Shane, great to be chatting with you in the Fast Lane. How different is the perception right now around JMU basketball from when we spoke a week ago, flipping from 3-4 in Sunbelt play to now above 500 at 5-4? And it appears we're still having some phone issues, chatting and trying to get a hold of Shane Metlin. So we'll see what the deal is with that. It happens. I'm going to, by the way, blame Philip, who is our newest intern, because whenever somebody new comes to the Virginia Talk Radio Network to learn production, to shadow, to start taking on a larger role, and, Philip's interning with us for the next few weeks. And we're optimistic that his role will be able to grow here. But this is the type of stuff that just cruelly seems to happen. Like, you're kind of left scratching your head going, how in the world does this happen on the first day? Which, I like to tell people, when you see something as a fine-tuned product and it looks like it's going well, it's one of these life lessons. It's like, for me, by the way, I'm the worst guy to try to ever convince somebody to go into sales. I do sales as part of my duties with the Virginia Talk Radio Network. And I enjoy it, love the partnerships. You get to meet a lot of great people in the community. But there's the idea of closing deals, getting across the finish line. Let's show them that. The reality is, it's just, there's a lot of a grind to that. Like, that's just kind of what it is. And your biggest patches of adversity and challenges are probably going to hit sooner rather than later. So this is just a little memento and a little warning, if you will, to our very own Philip. But we touched on JMU. Looks positive for them right now. For Virginia, we mentioned it a moment ago, I think the biggest concern, and we'll get into this later in the week, is, they had a system in place with Tony Bennett. And the idea with Tony Bennett was the pack line defense takes time to figure out. But the problem is, nobody has time in this day and age in college basketball. It is completely different than it was before. So we'll shift it over and go
now to UVA
with JerryRatcliffe.com founder and contributor Jerry Ratcliffe. Hootie, good to be speaking with you for Virginia. They had a chance to maybe get 2 in a row at home after the win against Boston College, but it felt like they never stood a chance against Notre Dame. And this is not a vintage Irish team who's the Irish, of course, in the bottom portion of the ACC as well. How discouraging was this loss coming at home on a Saturday in a sold-out JPJ?
I think it was very discouraging, Ed, because they're fighting for one of those spots to make it to the ACC tournament. As you know, 3 teams don't make it this year, and they're playing pretty much the bottom half of the conference over the next over the past week and the next week or two. So to have that team at home, a team that had lost 24 of its last 26 ACC road games, you figure, sort of a line in the sand, and you've got to put in maximum effort to try to make up as much ground as you possibly can in the standings before a sellout crowd, a little momentum on your side from beating BC, who was granted a terrible basketball team. But I thought it was very discouraging. The team had no fire. I know Ron Sanchez blamed himself for that, but he doesn't play defense, so it was on the players. They just acted like they were disinterested until it was really late in the game. It was too late.
And all of a sudden for Virginia, they're left in an interesting spot where all the momentum they gained from the blowout victory against Boston College seems like it went out the window against Notre Dame. There's a bigger picture topic that we discussed last week in the Fast Lane, and you've touched on the transfer angle and the difficulty of the credits at Virginia. How much of this is also the fact that, Ron Sanchez was kind of dealt an improbable hand this year, but if Virginia's not going to invest financially the way that their peer institutions are and the ones that they aspire to be, whether it's Ron Sanchez or you want to make a coaching change to someone else, the results are going to be hard to get what Virginia fans want and have grown accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, well, I think they stepped up their NIL game from what I've been told. So I'm not sure that's as much of an obstacle now as it was before. This team is just depleted of potential pro talent, Ed. And, you look back at some of those really good Tony Bennett teams, and they were chock full of players that went on to play in the NBA or the G League or somewhere professionally. And, some of those guys couldn't even get on the floor. Like Mario Shayak had to transfer out and play at Iowa State. Jay Huff had a hard time getting on the floor. They just had a lot of guys who could play basketball. And that's what Sanchez thought he was coming back here to do, was to help build another team like that. But in the last couple of years, they just haven't recruited that well. I thought this team had more talent than what it turned out to be, but I guess some of that is a function of so many new faces trying to play a system that usually takes a couple of years to learn, and they just haven't had the time to absorb all that in such a short span.
It's been one of the bigger challenges for Virginia, and am I wrong, Jerry? It doesn't feel like there's really an immediate solution, whether it's with Sanchez or someone else. The relief is going to come when you get a game plan together and have a tangible game plan that starts at the end of the season, although you're probably formulating it now.
Yeah, if they could find some way to keep this team together and add some crucial parts. If you look at them, they don't have the customary elite point guard that they've had over the past decade. They don't have that elite lockdown defender that they can stick on the hottest opponent and shut him down. They really don't have a physical rim protector, and those are three of the things that made Tony Bennett's defenses so great all that time. And they're missing those components. If they can add those through the portal and keep these guys together, there's the makings there of a decent team. But again, there's no unless it's Jacob Kofi, I don't see a potential pro player on this roster, and it's awfully hard to be continue to be a great program if you don't have that kind of talent.
Ultimately, that's what matters, and you're competing against other schools that are operating differently, and it's going to be hard to keep up with them, even if you have one of the better coaches in basketball. And, we'll wrap it up with this, Jerry. It's probably an attraction point as well. It's going to be hard to get those coaches if you don't empower them with the resources, knowing they're going to be fighting, proverbially speaking, with a hand tied behind their back.
Yeah, and, I would think, if you get a really solid coach to come in, the ACC is so down right now, it wouldn't be hard with just one solid recruiting class to really gain some ground on some of the better teams in the conference right now. So you're right. It's going to be difficult to lure the kind of coach that they want to come in here. I keep hearing names tossed about, but, it depends on what that coach desires. I mean, the ACC is not what it used to be by any stretch. And if it's just a matter of money, then I don't think that will be an object of getting the right guy in here. But it's a matter of there's somebody that wants to take on this challenge.
Yeah, it really is. And that's going to be a big one for Virginia, is finding the right coach and equipping him or her with the right resources to take on this challenge, which is getting the program back to where fans expect it to be in a totally different landscape. Jerry, you're equipped, and we always see the work at jerryratcliffe.com. Thank you for sharing some of that perspective today in the Fast Lane.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me. See you soon.
Now to the Virginia Tech Hokies.
With David Cunningham of TechSideline.com, and he gets to discuss Sam Seifkis. That's at least what I've seen from Vikings.com as the pronunciation for new Virginia Tech defensive coordinator, who was most recently the inside linebackers coach for the Arizona Cardinals. He was in Minnesota, and his only college experience was defensive coordinator and inside linebackers coach at Wofford, back BC, before COVID. David, for all the delays of 7 weeks in announcing the new defensive coordinator, is this a spot where the reaction is, wait, this is what we got?
Ed, I think it's underwhelming at first glance, but maybe is better than it seems. I think, and I'm going to pronounce, I'm not even going to say his name because I'm going to butcher it. He on paper, he is a good hire. He has worked under some of the best minds in football. If you look at that Virginia Tech release, you've got Mike Zimmer, you've got Jonathan Gannon, the current Arizona Cardinals head coach. Just glowing remarks from everybody he's worked with. There are like 4 or 5 different head coaches. Dave Aranda, the Baylor head coach, in there. Just coaches praising him. He's been around the block. He's seen a lot in the NFL. He brings experience as a linebackers head coach. What is curious to me is that he does not have experience at the Power 4 level as a coordinator, or really at all. I mean, he was at Wisconsin for a stint, kind of as a GA, and that's where I think he was with Aranda. But it seems like this is a hire that Pry went with, where he basically said, look, you've got some experience at the FCS level and the D3 level coordinating defenses, and you've got a lot of experience in the NFL learning from the best. Can you put it all together? And I don't know that that's necessarily out of the realm of possibility, but I think this is one where I'm curious to get Brent Pry's thoughts on the whole thing, and what are the things that stood out to him in terms of what he has done so well? Because clearly everybody raves about him. Why? And why does he fit Virginia Tech? I don't know that it's necessarily a bad hire. I'm kind of indifferent right now, I think. It's tough to tell. Again, this news just dropped at 5:30, so not too long ago. It's really, really interesting to look at this hire from afar, though, and go, okay, well, this is a guy who doesn't really have a ton of defensive coordinator experience, but at the same time, Bud Foster and Phil Amation did when they went to Virginia Tech and had a lot of success. So you pick your poison there a little bit. I think he fits well in some areas, maybe not as much in others. But I think we'll have a really good idea once we get a chance to talk to Brent Pry about the whole thing.
Yeah, we'll get an idea in the next couple of days whenever Brent Pry speaks on Sam Seifkis, which is what Vikings.com, Minnesota Vikings website, has to say about the pronunciation for the new defensive coordinator at Virginia Tech. So I'm just rolling with that because I trust Minnesota Vikings official team website, but we'll probably get real confirmation when he speaks with the media in the next couple of weeks. David, getting to this conclusion of Sam Seifkis, as the defensive coordinator. Was he a target all along that was kept under wraps, or did he become a more prominent target when other candidates rebuffed offers from Virginia Tech?
I think he was a target all along. That's the way it sounded to me. I think he just kind of flew quietly under the radar a little bit. And I think the Hokies might have had another one or two people in mind, and things kind of went different directions, and they kind of had to go back to this. There are 3 or 4 different names you can throw out, and I think that came off the top of Virginia Tech fans' head over the last couple of weeks. This guy's not one of them. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the wrong hire and won't do well. I think it's just kind of out of a little bit of left field, considering nobody knows about this guy. He's an unknown. And when a Virginia Tech fan sees this guy pop across the screen, when Pete Thamel reports it initially, and of course it's official now, I think a lot of fans were like, what in the world? Who is this guy? We've never heard of him. Once you read into him, he's got a pretty good background. I'm very interested to just sit down with him and kind of get a chance to hear from him and about his philosophy and what goes into coordinating his defenses. And when he was at Wofford, and he had pretty good defenses there at the FCS level, what worked so well? Does he carry that over? What has he learned in his time since? I think there's a lot to like about this guy. I think he's got a high upside. But at the same time, what does recruiting look like for him? What does the day-to-day look like of managing a room? He hasn't done that since his Wofford days, and that was a handful of years ago. So, again, push-pull a little bit. I think it's very, very early, obviously, still. It's been about 20 minutes, if that. So we'll see. We'll see where it all goes. But I don't necessarily hate it. I think it's one of those boom or bust things. A little bit, it feels like.
David Cunningham with perspective from TechSideline.com. He and his colleagues, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, and Will Stewart, will all have more thoughts, surely, in an upcoming TSL podcast and in work that you will read at TechSideline.com. David, thank you for your time in the fast lane. We'll pivot and hold off on the men's and women's basketball talk till another time because this was breaking news that popped up today, and we appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Now to the Liberty Flames.
John Manson from AseaofRed.com with us in the fast lane. John, Liberty men's basketball, it finally happened after a week of waiting. Richie McKay becomes the all-time winningest coach in men's basketball history for the Liberty Flames. We discussed this last week in the fast lane, and we'll throw it your way. And by the way, our listeners can check it out, Fast Lane, Ed Lane, wherever you listen to podcasts if you miss this. Is there a part of Richie McKay that, given that he does not like the spotlight to be on himself, that maybe he's almost glad this record took place on the road where, yeah, he could have a moment to celebrate with his team, but they weren't going to stop and make a big to-do about it, and maybe they'll mention it in the next game, but it'll kind of be old news when they get back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's actually interesting you point that out, Ed, and it's probably true. Coach McKay is a guy that always tries to stay away from the spotlight and tries to always deflect praise onto others, his other coaches, his team, his players, the admin at Liberty, and all the others as well too. So that's probably for a game, for it to happen in a game at FIU, where and then even further, Liberty's got 2 more road games this week. So like you said, by the time he gets back to having a game at Liberty Arena, I'm sure they'll have a little timeout, maybe pregame ceremony to honor him on the court. But by then it's 2 or 3 weeks old news, and everybody be moved on. So that's just kind of apropos for Coach McKay, the person he is. But you really can't say enough about the job he's done at Liberty. 10 years in here in this second cycle, and a lot of people forget just how bad and how much of dire straits the program was when he took over. I mean, Liberty had lost 20 or more games 3 out of the 4 years prior, and that 4th year wasn't like it was a good year. They lost 18 that season too. So McKay comes in, and it was a slow grind for him too. I mean, Liberty lost its first 11 Division I games under Coach McKay in his first year back, and took a little while, but under guys like Lavelle Capel, Georgie Pacheco-Ortiz, Caleb Holmesley, Scotty James, and Mayo Baxter-Bell, that the program got turned around slowly but surely, and has gone on to win 20 plus games in 7 different seasons. Obviously, the 2019 team that won NCAA tournament game, the only NCAA tournament win the program has. That's a feather in the cap. Won 3 straight ASUN titles and so much more that we could talk about, but we don't really have time for that right now. But yeah, the job Coach McKay has done. I tweeted it out this weekend. He's on the Mount Rushmore of all time Liberty coaches, regardless of sports, not just men's basketball. He's obviously at the top of that list, but for all sports at Liberty, he's got to be included amongst the greatest that's ever been at Liberty.
John, what does it say about the reception that Richie McKay got from Colin Porter and the fact that the team found out about it and they doused him with water after the win against Florida International?
Yeah, if you haven't seen that video, definitely go on social media and look it up. Liberty men's basketball posted it on their socials. It's really cool and just kind of shows the love, respect, and admiration that his players and his team has for him as they heard about him breaking the record and gave him a little water bath there in the locker room down in Miami at FIU. And it's fun to see some of those behind-the-scenes moments sometimes of different teams. Obviously Liberty men's basketball is no different. You know that they have a lot of respect for their coach, and you see it just in the interactions that they have before and after games and before and after press conferences, and you can tell that they love and respect each other. And it starts with Coach McKay and goes all the way down to graduate assistants and walk-ons on the team as well too.
John, I know we made this about Richie McKay and breaking the all-time wins record and kept the focus of our chat today to that, but it's a special occasion, especially for Liberty fans and what he's meant to the program. So we appreciate your going in that direction with our chat today, and we look forward to chatting again in another week. And Richie McKay will probably be glad that we just focus on basketball or other sports as well.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Thanks for having me on, Ed. Talk to you soon.
Our pleasure. John Manson, SCFRed.com, with us here in the Fast Lane, Ed Lane, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you missed that.
And last but not least, or maybe least,
those haters can't stand us. Left hand up. Who are we? The Commanders.
The left-hand uppers. And Washington was aggressive early. They tried to stay in that game against Philadelphia, and then it all came unraveling. Candy Waller was there for Bowie TV Sports, and our boots on the ground throughout this entire run, one step shy of the Super Bowl. We appreciate your being on site and being available for us throughout this season, Seawall. Glad to be speaking with you here in the Fast Lane on W227BG Timberlake, WVGM AM Lynchburg, WMNA Gretna, Danville, Southside, and part of the VTRN Sports app. For Washington, the aggressiveness in the game, it was great, but then of the turnovers Washington had, which is a bigger picture theme, was the biggest one the Austin Eckler fumble at midfield, because Washington had a chance to make it a one-score game late in the third quarter, and the whole belief they had seemed like it could come to life. Instead, you fumble, Philly goes back down, and it's an 18-point game and really never close after that.
I think that all of the turnovers were big because the Eagles were able to score on each and every one. One of the things that I kept saying when folks were asking me throughout the week, how do the Commanders stop Saquon Barkley? I'm like, keep him off the field. That's how you stop him, because he's just an incredible athlete and player. So the Commanders didn't do that. The turnovers really hurt each and every single one of them, and because the Eagles were able to maximize off of each and every single one, that really hurt the Commanders overall.
That's a great amount of perspective from Candy Waller on the overall volume of turnovers. What's your take on how Dan Quinn mentioned it, that, outside of maybe the Jaden Daniels trying to make a play, a lot of these were Philadelphia created the turnovers, showing Washington that maybe roster construction is the biggest area where they need to go to bridge the gap between themselves and the top teams in the NFL?
Well, in the round 2 of Commanders versus Eagles at Northwest Stadium, the Commanders had 5 turnovers that the Eagles had created in that game. So the Eagles are known to wreak havoc on this Commanders offense. That they show their physicality, they punch the ball out. They are trying to get to the football. And so it was interesting to see that what the Commanders did against the Detroit Lions, the Commanders defense to the Lions offense, they were not able to emulate that again this week. I think that was the bigger shock to me, because in round 2, the Eagles defense created those turnovers, but the defense was better, much better in rounds 1 and 2. But on yesterday, the Commanders defense just wasn't getting it done. They were not getting it done, and it hurt them overall.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately they could not, and those are things to address in the offseason. One of the tones that stood out about the Washington Commanders' loss, and we haven't gotten to this yet, but we will later this week here in the Fast Lane, and that is for the Commanders, they ultimately view this as the best learning experience possible of what it feels like to lose this game, but also where they need to improve in the areas, not just personnel-wise, but schematic-wise as well. How much is this something that, as painful as it is in the moment, is the best learning experience for the Commanders?
You know what? As you know this, Ed, because I was sharing with you, I'm coming from Ashburn, as you probably hear, I'm in the car. And so we just wrapped up the end of season press conference with head coach Dan Quinn and general manager Adam Peters. And in Dan Quinn's opening statement, that was one of the key things that he mentioned. One of the things this team had not really experienced. They got beat really bad. And the season, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do to move forward and who they kind of want to be when they grow up, right? What does it take to really compete at this level and win to get to the Super Bowl, to compete with a team like the Philadelphia Eagles who are within their division? So that was a key thing. When you really look at it, this team had not really faced that much adversity until yesterday.
Yeah, that's the thing for Washington, is how to handle that type of adversity. And yesterday was a cold dose of reality as far as a lesson of going about that. Candy, you've been great to connect with us throughout the entire playoff run. Thank you so much for your time today in the Fast Lane. We appreciate it, and if you're cool with it, we'll give you a break for another couple weeks and then circle back out as we get closer to the NFL offseason in about a month.
Hey, that sounds great. Thank you guys so much for having me. I have a blast checking in with you all on Mondays after the game. So pleasure to continue on doing it. And I guess I'll be talking to you all in a month.
Find a nice beach.
Yes. Get some rest and relaxation, Seawall, because the grind never stops.
I am exhausted, I must admit.
Well, it's been great. You've done great work, and we always look forward to it. Bowie TV Sports' very own Candy Waller with us in the Fast Lane. Our girl, boots on the ground. Seawall, appreciate it. We'll chat soon.
All righty. Thank you so much. Talk to you guys soon.
Indeed. Candy Waller with us here to wrap up the Fast Lane.
I didn't even think about that. These Washington reporters not used to this long of a season because of dysfunction.
It's testing your stamina. One day when Philip gets more into the seat of producer and gets to, sit behind the mic, we'll ask him. It's kind of like going from, a high school player to a college player. Like, the workload increases, the time commitment goes up. It seems like it's kind of what the Commanders have experienced this year, and that's what they got to enjoy. Meanwhile, we hope you enjoyed the Fast Lane. We're back more on these subjects tomorrow in the Fast Lane, 5 to 6 p.m. VTR and Sports App, 93.3 FM.
They have new guys step up all the time. And you know this, Dad, in so many